Have you ever met someone who doesn't need to say anything, yet you can still feel a profound sense of empathy from them? Someone who, just through a glance or their silence, makes you feel like their whole world is unfolding before your eyes. Today's story is about such a person. Evelyn, a young woman who brought music to the elderly hearts in a nursing home in Boston, and an old man who never uttered a word, yet his presence brought something very special. So, would you be willing to pause for a moment to listen to this story? Because sometimes, just one small moment can change the way we perceive life, just like how music can touch the heart without a name. Before we begin, take a few seconds to hit the subscribe button on our Gentle Heart Stories channel. Don't worry, it will only take 10 seconds, but we will have wonderful moments together throughout this story. Are you ready? Now, let's begin the story of The Nameless Symphony in Boston. Evelyn, a young woman in her 20s, was not a professional artist, but she had a special passion for music. Every Saturday morning, after waking up early, she would arrange everything to head to the Boston nursing home, where she volunteered to play the piano for the elderly. This was a volunteer job Evelyn had chosen, not because she wanted anything in return, but because of the peace in her heart whenever her fingers touched the piano keys. She didn't know that she was creating special moments for the elderly there, who had once lived lives full of turmoil and now only had silence left. Evelyn didn't seek fame, didn't need anyone to know her. She only wanted to be the pianist who brought a little light into the dark world of the nursing home, where the elderly often felt lonely, lost, and had nothing to hold on to. The music she played wasn't classical masterpieces, but the melodies were deep enough to melt hearts. Every time the piano played, the air in the room would become still, as if time stopped, and the whole room seemed to drift into another world, a world of music, where all the worries and sorrows of daily life were forgotten. Though not a famous artist, Evelyn had the ability to choose beautiful pieces, songs with gentle and deep melodies. Each time she sat before the piano, Evelyn didn't just play the piano, she would immerse herself in each note. She didn't play by a template, but by her own emotions. Evelyn loved the classical pieces of Chopin, Beethoven, and melodies that brought a sense of quietness and purity. She especially loved Chopin's nocturnes because they were soft, like a gentle breeze brushing through, gliding over souls lost in old memories. Every time she played those tunes, Evelyn not only felt peaceful, but also sensed a deep resonance from those around her. The elderly there didn't need to speak, but every time Evelyn stopped, she could see their eyes light up, filled with emotions that words could not express. Her music not only eased the pains of old age, but also created a silent connection between her and the listeners, between the past and the present. These were moments full of emotion, a blend of what had passed and what remained. Every Saturday morning, Evelyn would arrive at the nursing home before the appointed time, before anyone else arrived. She didn't just come to play for the elderly, but also to find a moment of solitude for herself. During these times, no one disturbed her, no one spoke, just her and the piano, a quiet space filled only with music and deep thoughts. This was when she truly felt peace, as everything outside seemed to disappear. In that small room, she could play for herself, without worrying about anything else. Evelyn loved that feeling, a sense of being immersed in each note, as if music was the only way she could connect with the deep emotions inside her. During these moments, she wasn't a young woman with worries about life, but a part of the music, blending into each sound, each high and low note, and when it ended, she felt lighter, as if all the troubles had been released. That was the time she always looked forward to every week. On one special Saturday morning, when Evelyn was playing Chopin's Nocturne No. 2, she felt something strange. The soothing notes rang out, gently like a breeze, and while those sounds still lingered in the air, she suddenly heard a light applause coming from somewhere in the room. Evelyn stopped playing, a sense of confusion spreading in her heart. She looked around, but saw no one in the room, except for the piano and some empty chairs. What was happening? She didn't know, but a part of her also sensed that something unusual was happening. The applause, though light, was very sincere, as if it was a thank you, a silent appreciation. She didn't understand why, but part of her felt a connection from that applause. It was a strange moment, but also very beautiful, as if there was a soul listening and cherishing what she brought. When Evelyn turned to find the source of the applause, she suddenly met a deep gaze from the shadows. An old man sat in the dim light of the hallway, his eyes dark and deep, as if holding a world that Evelyn could not comprehend. He said nothing, did not move, just sat quietly there, and then gently nodded toward her. Evelyn felt something very special in that nod, a respect, a wordless connection. This old man, though not speaking, gave her a sense of familiarity, as if he understood each piece of music she played. Though no words were spoken, in that moment, Evelyn felt that she was no longer alone in the music. His silence was like a language that only the two of them could understand. She smiled gently, said nothing, didn't ask anything, but strangely, she felt that this old man was part of the morning she always longed for. And so, every Saturday morning, the old man would arrive earlier than everyone else, sitting in a corner of the room, quietly listening to Evelyn play. Though no one introduced him, no words were spoken, there was always a special connection between them, which Evelyn could feel clearly every time she sat down at the piano. Every time the old man appeared, Evelyn not only felt his presence in the room, but also sensed a resonance from his eyes, from the silence he gave her. There was no intrusion, no praise or criticism, just peaceful and emotional moments. Over time, Evelyn understood that the old man didn't come just to listen to music, but to live in those moments of silence with her. To share emotions that words could not express. If you feel that this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next inspiring stories. At Gentle Heart Stories, we share tales of kindness, change, and the valuable lessons life teaches us. Be a part of this loving community and help us spread positive messages. Every Saturday morning, when Evelyn arrived at the nursing home, the room where she played the piano was quiet. She always arrived early, but there was one man, someone she had never spoken to, who was always there before her. This elderly man was very special, even though he never said a word, he made Evelyn feel like there was a special audience waiting for her. He had silver hair, wrinkled skin of old age, and always wore an old, worn woolen coat. Every time Evelyn saw him, he would sit quietly in the corner of the room, where the light didn't shine much, as though he wanted to keep a private space for himself, but at the same time, he was a part of her musical world. No one knew exactly who he was or why he came, but every week he was there, even before anyone else. Evelyn never understood why he chose to sit in the corner of the room, a place with no attention, but to her, it was a sign that he was there to listen, not to watch or judge. He was the only one in the nursing home who kept the habit of arriving before the music started, while the others came late or only participated once the performance had begun. Evelyn never asked him about this because she sensed that he only wanted to be a silent listener, without the need for attention. And Evelyn, with her sensitive soul, never bothered him, just quietly played the piano while he sat still, his eyes full of focus and respect, since she realized that the elderly man always came before everyone else. Evelyn began to think about him more during her piano sessions. It wasn't just playing for the elderly people anymore, but now, she played for him as well, even though she didn't know his name or background. Every Saturday morning, she wondered if he liked any particular pieces, if there was a composition she could play that would make him feel special. She began experimenting with different pieces, from the romantic melodies of Chopin to the gentle, airy tunes of Debussy. During these times, Evelyn didn't think about anyone other than the elderly man sitting silently behind her. She tried to make the melodies perfect, not only for the others to enjoy, but especially for him to feel her emotions through every note. She never received clear feedback from him, but through her music, she noticed his small reactions, a faint smile, a nod, or sometimes, he would close his eyes, as if he were completely immersed in the melody. Even though he never spoke, his actions were enough for Evelyn to feel that he was listening and sensing every note, as if he were living in the world she created. Sometimes, when she saw him close his eyes, Evelyn felt an even stronger desire to play well, not to impress him, but because she sensed that he was finding something in the music that she couldn't express in words. One Saturday morning, as Evelyn was playing a piece by Schubert, she made a small mistake in the middle of the piece. It was a moment she couldn't ignore, as her fingers suddenly failed to press the right keys, and the sound became jarring, out of rhythm. She tried to regain her composure and continue, but immediately, she felt a gaze directed toward her. When she finished the piece, she saw that the elderly man had opened his eyes, his gaze no longer tightly shut as it had been before. He looked at her for a moment, then gently nodded twice, a very subtle action, but enough for Evelyn to recognize it as a sign. A form of encouragement, not through words, but through silence and a look full of understanding. She didn't think he was criticizing her, on the contrary, it felt like a quiet reassurance, as if to say, "It's okay, keep going." Evelyn realized that he didn't need praise or judgment, just a small sign to let him know that she was doing fine. He didn't need to say anything for her to feel the understanding coming from him. And in that moment, Evelyn felt at ease, no longer blaming herself for the mistake. In fact, she felt forgiven, in a very natural way. Without any criticism. It was a wordless encouragement, an acceptance, as if he were saying, "Keep going, no one is perfect, but the important thing is that you don't give up." After each musical session, Evelyn couldn't help but think of the elderly man. He had become an important part of her mornings. Even though she didn't know his name, she could feel his presence as a silent friend, someone who truly understood and felt the music deeply. In her heart, she called him the nameless listener, because he seemed to be an audience member who never said a word, but he was the one with whom she felt she could share all her emotions through every note. When she played, she didn't just think of the others in the nursing home, but sometimes, she chose pieces with the thought, "He will like this." She tried to select pieces she thought he would truly feel, as though he could understand exactly what she wanted to convey through the melodies. There were times when she wondered if he sensed the sad pieces she chose, the delicate, emotional melodies, or if he liked the more powerful, exhilarating tunes. Even so, she always felt that he was an essential part of her Saturday mornings. And she had started finding comfort in playing not just for herself, but for him. She couldn't explain why, but his presence always brought her a strange sense of peace. The elderly man continued to come to the nursing home every Saturday morning, but it seemed that no one knew who he was. No one knew his name or where he came from. He never spoke to anyone at the nursing home and had never been introduced. He simply came every weekend, sat and listened to the music, and then disappeared after the performance. Evelyn always wondered about him. Did he have a family? Where did he live? Why did he choose to come to this nursing home? She had tried asking the nursing home staff, but no one knew anything about him. The people there only knew that he showed up every Saturday morning, and after the music ended, he would quietly leave, leaving no trace. Some people in the nursing home speculated that he might be wealthy, but no one could confirm this. For Evelyn, this didn't matter. She didn't need to know too much about him. As long as he was there, listening every Saturday, that was enough. But one Saturday morning, when Evelyn arrived at the nursing home and sat down at her familiar piano, she noticed that the elderly man was not there. The room was as usual, filled with people, but he was missing. Evelyn looked around but didn't see him in the corner of the room where he always sat. A feeling of emptiness rose in her heart. She continued to play, but everything suddenly felt different. There was no applause from him, no gaze from the elderly man, no familiar nod. It was as though a vital part of the room was missing. Evelyn kept playing but couldn't shake off the feeling of loss. It felt as though not just a listener was missing, but a silent friend, someone who had become a part of her musical world. The sensation was strange and uncomfortable, as though a part of the soul of that morning was missing. She felt the emptiness growing, unsure if he would ever return. Evelyn entered the empty room on a late afternoon. Today, there were not many visitors, only a few vague sounds, the click of shoes on the tiled floor, the whispers of patients who had stopped talking, and the faint light streaming through the windows, like weak rays from the past. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but when she saw the small envelope lying on the piano, her heart suddenly fluttered. The envelope had no name, no indication of the sender, except for a handwritten sheet of music, which seemed to have been written long ago. The brown ink had faded over time, but the handwriting remained clear, and there was something very special in every stroke. "Try playing this piece at the end of the day," the note made Evelyn feel a strange sensation. There were no explanations, just a simple request, but it carried a familiar feeling as if the writer knew she would be able to sense it. This feeling had never occurred when she played other pieces. Melodies, though beautiful, still lacked something very important. She put the envelope down and sat at the piano. Under her fingers, the music seemed to have no beginning or end, only soft, gentle lines, like a breath from a soul full of emotions. Evelyn couldn't explain it, but she knew that this piece was not just music, it was a message, a whisper she couldn't yet understand. When Evelyn took the sheet music home and tried playing it, she did not expect any major change. However, the moment her fingers touched the keys, a strange sensation enveloped her. The soft, quiet sound seemed to lift a thin veil of memories and emotions. As the melody flowed through each note, gentle but haunting, Evelyn couldn't explain why, but it felt as if something was emanating from the piano keys, not just music, but the heart of someone slowly unfolding. She could feel every note, every moment, as if someone was whispering in her ear, telling her a story, a wordless story that was still very clear. She didn't know who had composed the piece. It could have been a famous musician from the past or just a stranger leaving their mark through these sounds. But it was undeniable that each note seemed to carry a story of its own, a soul hidden behind it. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her, feeling each emotion pass by, from soft sadness to fleeting joy, then back to a silence full of regret. The feeling was so familiar, like a love that had sunk into memory, but was now awakened. This piece, though wordless, felt like a deep message that, as long as she listened, she would understand. The following week, when Evelyn sat down at the piano at the end of the day, the streaks of light had begun to fade. The room seemed to calm down, leaving only the music to fill the space, gentle like the breath of a day about to pass. The others had already left, leaving the room silent, as if waiting for something. Evelyn began to play the piece again, just as the letter had instructed. She was unaware that, in the shadows of the room, the old man had returned. He quietly entered, standing at a distance, watching her. Under the dim light, he seemed to be listening with his whole soul, not just with his ears, but with his heart, as if he understood every emotion, every breath in each note. When the music ended, he nodded, his gaze soaked with appreciation. He raised his arm, lightly placing it on his chest, as if acknowledging that the music had touched something deep within him. No words were spoken, only the silence that conveyed a deep empathy between the two. The sensation was strange, but Evelyn knew that it was a moment that couldn't be expressed in words. She smiled gently, as if understanding the message he wanted to convey, without needing to say anything. Afterward, he began leaving more pieces of music. Each one was a small part of the story he was telling, a wordless story but deeply profound. The pieces carried melodies that were somber, mournful, like the sighs of the past, but they also contained gentle rays of light, like beautiful memories that had passed. She realized that each piece was like a painting of a moment in life that he wanted to share. Evelyn played them gently, listening to the unspoken words he wanted to convey. There were no explanations, no annotations, but she could feel it. These pieces of music were the records of a rich soul. A soul that had lived long enough to understand that the most beautiful memories are often those that cannot be spoken. And Evelyn understood that the old man, through these pieces, was trying to connect with the world around him, with people like her, those who knew how to listen not just with their ears but with their hearts. Gradually, Evelyn began to practice these pieces separately, not in a hurry, not rushing. Each piece was noted down in a small notebook of hers, but without titles, only simple notations. Number 3, for the one who still listens, or, number 5, for the silent heart. She didn't know their real names, but she could feel the messages the old man was sending through each piece. Some nights, when the sky was dark, she would still sit and play, not for anyone else, but for herself. Those melodies seemed to bring her comfort, as if they had become a part of her life, like a wordless companion. These pieces were not just a technical challenge but a journey of discovering emotions, a deep connection with both the past and the present. Evelyn didn't need to understand everything about the person who wrote them, but the sound spoke everything she needed to know. She felt that sometimes, music doesn't need words, because it can convey every emotion we cannot say out loud. The more she played these pieces, the more Evelyn felt a deep connection with the old man that she couldn't explain. She began to wonder if he had been a musician in the past, if he had lived a life full of music and emotions. But she didn't dare ask. Every time she saw him, she felt a deep respect and silence between them. It was this silence, this unspoken communication, that was the most sacred and important. Evelyn understood that sometimes there are things that don't need to be asked, things that don't need to be spoken, because silence is the perfect answer. She continued to play these pieces, not just for her love of music, but for something deeper, a connection she couldn't express in words. That music had become the heartbeat of her soul, and Evelyn felt that, even if the old man had left this world, these pieces would remain, like a message from an eternal soul, a wordless farewell but full of affection. If you feel that this story touches your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next inspiring stories. At Gentle Heart Stories, we share tales of kindness, transformation, and valuable life lessons. Be a part of this loving community and help us spread positive messages. On a late afternoon, as the last rays of the day slowly faded, the nursing home hosted a small concert. It wasn't a grand event with orchestras or famous artists, but just a simple evening with elderly people wanting to rediscover a touch of the romance of their youth. Evelyn sat by the old piano in the home, a piano she had played thousands of times but still felt fresh every time her fingers touched its keys. This time, she didn't play a piece of her own choosing, but the unnamed number 5 that the old man had sent her. Beside her, the old man stepped onto the stage, holding a violin worn down by the years. The violin was no longer a perfect instrument, but in his hands, it was like a treasure filled with memories. Evelyn couldn't take her eyes off him, feeling the depth and stillness in every step he took. They didn't exchange a word before the performance began, they just looked at each other, nodding gently as if understanding that this was a moment of invisible connection, where souls didn't need words to express themselves. And when the violin began to play, Evelyn immediately harmonized with him. Letting the two instruments, two souls, breathe in unison. At the beginning, Evelyn didn't feel nervous, not because she was used to performances, but because, in this moment, everything seemed to blend together, with no distinction between her and the old man, between the piano and the violin. She couldn't explain it, but the music they created wasn't just a series of notes, it was a perfect fusion of souls that had lived through many ups and downs. The piece unnamed number 5 didn't have lively rhythms, nor did it contain excited melodies. It was gentle, somber, yet carried an invisible power, a piece that felt strangely serene. Every key Evelyn pressed, every note the old man drew from his violin, seemed to tell a wordless story about the vibrant moments of life. She felt the sadness, sacrifice, and also the forgiveness in every melody. Evelyn's eyes were on the old man, and she knew that he was conveying a very profound part of himself to her. She didn't dare to ask about his past, but in every note, she sensed a long, tumultuous story that he couldn't speak aloud. When the music ended, the entire room fell into absolute silence. There was no applause, no praise, only silent tears on the faces of the elderly people in the nursing home. The room seemed to harmonize with a single emotion, as if everyone had found a forgotten memory in those melodies. Some of the people in the audience had lived through many decades, with stories and memories that never ran dry. They had experienced wars, losses, joys that were fleeting like a passing breeze. But now, they couldn't hold back their tears, not because the music was too sad, but because it was too beautiful. It was a reminder of years gone by, of dreams left unfulfilled, of loved ones who had passed away. The tears of the elderly weren't a sign of weakness but of liberation, of a release they had never had the chance to feel throughout their lives. When the performance ended, the old man bowed his head gently, as if he had completed a task, and then quietly stepped down from the stage. Evelyn remained seated, her hands still resting on the piano, her eyes blurry from tears she couldn't contain. But inside her, there was a different feeling. It wasn't sadness, but a deep comfort, as if she had found the answers to questions she had long asked herself. She knew that not everyone could understand what she had just experienced, but she also knew that those tears weren't a sign of sorrow. They were a profound acknowledgement of beauty, of an invisible connection between souls, of harmony between people and music. Evelyn sat there for a moment, looking up at the audience, seeing the elderly people still seated, their eyes following memories from the past, as if they had been freed from old griefs, from memories buried for many years. As the people gradually left, Evelyn stayed at the piano for a long time. Her tears hadn't dried, but not because of sorrow. She felt a peace, a connection she had never experienced before. She couldn't explain the feeling, but it was like a gentle wave soothing the wounds in her heart. She gently ran her hand over the sheet music the old man had first given her. This time, when she looked at the writing on it, she no longer saw just musical notes. She saw a story, the story of a man who had lived a life full of losses and hardships but still held on to a passion for music. She realized that the trembling but patient handwriting wasn't just a note, but the traces of a long, challenging life. Each note, each word written on the sheet music wasn't just sound, but memories, emotions he couldn't share with words. At home, Evelyn opened the sheet music the old man had left for her. She looked at each stroke, not the handwriting of a young person, but of someone who had lived through a lot in life. The handwriting was filled with exhaustion but also with love, sacrifice, and unspoken feelings. She realized that this sheet music wasn't just a gift from him, but a part of him, an expression of his soul conveyed through each key, each violin note. She didn't need to ask him about his past anymore, because through those notes, she understood. She knew he had lived a life full of challenges, and music was what helped him survive those ups and downs. And now, she knew that she would always remember him, not for the words he spoke, but for the way he conveyed his emotions through music. In the weeks following his disappearance, Evelyn felt an emptiness in her heart. Every evening, she would sit by the piano, the golden light of sunset casting over the wooden keys, waiting for a sign, the familiar sound of footsteps. But no matter how long she waited, he did not appear. The quiet afternoons were missing the little conversations, the gentle advice, the warm, deep laugh of his. Evelyn tried to hold on to the hope that he would return, but her heart gradually grew weary. She decided to visit the nursing home, hoping to find a clue about his disappearance. But when she asked, the staff just shook their heads, and no one knew who he was. It seemed as though he had never existed there. Questions flooded her mind, making her heart heavier. Why had he left without saying goodbye? Had he decided to leave this world without anyone knowing? She sat by the piano one rainy afternoon, with only the sound of the rain falling and her own playing to comfort her, as if to soothe the pain and confusion in her heart. Feeling that she could not continue to sit silently and wait, Evelyn decided to do something to reconnect with him. Even though she knew that he might no longer be able to hear, she still wanted to send him a message, a word not spoken aloud, but from the heart. One afternoon, she sat by the piano, looking out at the rain, her hands gently gliding over the keys. Soft sounds emerged, but she did not play any particular song. Her emotions settled within her, and Evelyn took a piece of paper and wrote a message, placing it on the piano. If you can still hear this music, I am still playing for you. She hoped that her message would reach him, even in some small moment, no matter where he was. These words, though simple, carried all the affection she had for him, all the gratitude for the afternoons they had shared together. Evelyn did not expect an answer, it was just a way to maintain the connection between them, even though they no longer met. She hoped that he could feel the melodies she played, and that, wherever he was, he would know that she still remembered him. The next week, one early morning, as Evelyn was preparing for her workday, an unaddressed envelope appeared on her desk. The doorman had delivered it, saying it had been left for her, with no sender's name or any clear marks. Evelyn opened the envelope with curiosity and a bit of nervousness. When she looked at the contents, she recognized the familiar handwriting, but this time, it was not from him, but from another man, one she had once known well through music. He wrote, "Thank you for listening to me, though I never spoke. Music is the last thing I leave behind for the world." Evelyn felt a deep emotion swell in her heart. These words, gentle yet meaningful, seemed to tell her that music, though he had never spoken it aloud, was the way he wanted to communicate everything. "Thank you for being patient enough to listen, to understand what he could not say with words. She never imagined that a simple thank you could move her so, as though he had entrusted her with a part of his soul. At the bottom of the letter was a carefully typed sheet of music, each note clear, easy to read and understand. At the top of the sheet music was a handwritten line. Like a special sign only he could understand, love song for the player of the nameless piano. Evelyn sat there, gazing at the sheet music with a sense of unfamiliarity and reverence. The words, the notes, seemed to have been woven in his heart, sent to her as a final message. She felt honored to receive this gift, a gift not everyone could have. This sheet music was not just music, but a part of him, a legacy he left behind. The words in the letter felt like an explanation, as if he wanted to say that music was all he could share with her, and this sheet of music was his final mark. Evelyn carefully placed the sheet music on the piano, but she did not rush to play. She sat there, her hands lightly touching the keys, as if to feel each note, each word he wanted to convey. She did not play immediately, but sat there, her hands gently resting on the keys, as if touching the emotions he had embedded in each note. Evelyn didn't need to play the entire piece because she already felt everything he wanted to convey. She sat in silence, listening to the music inside her, hearing each sound as if it were echoing from the past. Those notes didn't need to resonate aloud, for they were already deep within her soul. Evelyn felt a closeness to him, as though the music had spoken for him, for all the things he had not yet said. She didn't need to play the entire piece to understand what was hidden within it. Just listening, the stillness in her heart, was enough. The piano keys seemed to touch her heart, and in that moment, Evelyn felt he was no longer distant. Finally, Evelyn stood up without playing the piece. She just looked at it, letting the silence speak everything. She had already played enough, no more words were necessary. The music had said all it needed to say. Evelyn felt that she had accomplished something very important. Something that couldn't be expressed in words. She didn't need to sing, she didn't need to say anything else. The silence was enough to show her gratitude, respect, and love for him. She knew that he would always live in the music, and though he was no longer by her side, the music would forever be the bridge between their two souls. She placed the sheet music down, but her heart still resonated with the melodies, as if he were still there, listening. At the end-of-year performance at the nursing home, Evelyn stood on stage, the spotlight shining on her familiar piano. She felt a strange peace spread through her heart, though her hands still trembled in front of the crowd. This was the first time she had decided to share a piece of music that she had never publicly played before, a special melody that she had kept in her heart for a long time. It was the love song that he had left for her. Each note was soaked in gratitude and deep affection for him, an unspoken thank you, a connection between two souls that music had drawn. Evelyn didn't feel the need to explain the piece any further. She simply said, "This is the final gift from someone who understood me without words." Her words were a tribute to the beautiful memories, the precious moments that she and he had shared. As the piano keys resonated, Evelyn was not just playing music, she was playing memories, playing words of gratitude, and most importantly, she was playing her heart. As she began playing the first notes, no one in the audience said a word. Everyone was silent, as if drawn into the space of the music, where only the melodies and emotions were the language. The people in the nursing home, though elderly, seemed to still have sharp ears, able to feel each note passing like gentle waves lapping against the shore. Evelyn did not introduce the music or talk about its origins. She didn't need to say anything more. Because the music spoke for her. The keys, the notes, were enough to convey the message she wanted to send. When the final notes sounded, a deep stillness enveloped the room. The entire audience remained silent for a long time, as if no one wanted to break that sacred moment. Then, as if by instinct, everyone stood up and applauded. The applause echoed through the room, warm and full of emotion, like a tribute not only to Evelyn but also to the piece of music, to the memories and emotions it contained. An elderly man sitting nearby, his eyes misty with emotion, softly said, "I hear the heart of someone who's gone." His words seemed like an acknowledgement, a testimony to the power of music in conveying emotions that words sometimes cannot express. The old man's words resonated, not just as a passing remark, but as a genuine feeling about the music. Evelyn stood there, her heart seemingly stopping for a moment, because she understood that what she had just played was not just music, but a piece of the heart, a part of a story that had never been fully told. She knew that the music had touched the people in the room in ways she could not have imagined. Each person, each listener, felt it in their own way. But all understood that this music was a thank you without words. Some tears rolled down the faces of some, while others just smiled, their eyes lighting up as though they had found something important, a part of themselves in the music. Evelyn felt the deep connection from each audience member, and that made her heart feel warmer than ever. These people, though they didn't know her before, all understood that music was the medium to say the things that words could not express. After the performance, Evelyn returned to her room, where her familiar piano awaited her. She no longer worried about having to explain the piece, because she knew everyone had understood the message she wanted to send. However, as she entered the room, she was surprised to find the love song placed back on the piano, exactly where she usually kept it. What was strange was that, on the music sheet, there was now a handwritten note: "If you keep playing, I will always be present." Evelyn stopped, staring at the note in amazement. It was a message she could never forget. This message was not from anyone else but from him, the one who had given her this piece of music. She felt warmth spread in her heart, as if he were still close, still watching over her, still listening to the melodies she played. She didn't need to say anything more. That note, like a promise, was a commitment that he would always live on in the music, in her heart, even if he was no longer beside her. Evelyn placed her hands on the keys, gently brushing over them, feeling his presence like a soft breeze, always here. Suddenly, a gentle sound echoed from the door. Evelyn looked up and saw an elderly man with white hair standing at the door. He was not someone she recognized, but his gaze made her stop. His gaze was so familiar, as if she had seen it in a dream. The old man smiled at her and nodded, as if he knew everything that had happened. Evelyn felt a strange sensation, as if he were part of the past, a part of a forgotten memory, but now he was here to deliver a message. She looked at him, not saying anything, only sensing that there was a connection between them. His gaze, his smile, seemed like proof of continuity, of the idea that good things would never be lost, no matter how much time passed. Evelyn smiled gently and bowed her head in greeting. She understood that there was no need for further words, because all she had to do was continue playing the music. That was the only way she could say thank you, say goodbye to him, and at the same time keep him in her heart. She sat down at the piano, gently gliding her hands across the keys, playing a small part of the love song. She didn't need to call his name, because the music had spoken for him. She knew he was still there, in every note, in every sound. She knew that love, though it could not be expressed in words, would always resonate, living on in her heart and in the music. Though he was no longer there, the music and that love would always be present, without needing to call his name. There are melodies that don't need lyrics, yet they are enough to stir the heart. There are people who pass through our lives as lightly as a piece of music, nameless, wordless, but leaving an echo that lasts forever. As Evelyn's story comes to a close, something continues to resonate, like the gentle echo of a soul that has touched the most sacred thing in music, the connection between two hearts. And here is the conclusion, the final thank you to all those who have ever listened with their whole heart. Many years later, Evelyn was no longer the young girl playing the piano at the nursing home, now she was teaching music to those who couldn't afford lessons. Each class began with a nameless piece of music, the old songs the elderly man had once sent to her. On the wall of the classroom was a pencil sketch of an elderly man with white hair, sitting silently listening to the piano. No one knew who he was, they only knew that she always said, "This is my first teacher," though he never spoke a word. One day, a student asked, "Do you think he can still hear your music?" Evelyn smiled, nodded, and said, "As long as you play with all your heart, he's still listening, somewhere." At the end of each course, she gifted her students an untitled piece of music, with the familiar words written, "To the one who still listens." And so, the music of one person silently spread, not through a large stage, not through glory, but through hearts connecting with each other, playing music for one simple reason, to share love. If you feel your heart has just touched an untitled melody, don't keep it to yourself. Share this story with those you love. Follow the Gentle Heart Stories channel to spread tender, humane, and inspiring stories like Evelyn and the Nameless Listener. Because there are hearts that just need one note at the right time, one story to the right person, to find the light in life again. Subscribe, share, and comment with your feelings, because who knows, your whisper today could become the song for the one who still listens tomorrow. Gentle Heart Stories, where gentle souls find each other.